Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 6 stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. Before we start that, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. Alright, on to the stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Mrs. Knockers81. When my ex learned to not ask me to do anything for him anymore. A bit of a backstory. I divorced my ex a little over 9 years ago after 14 years of marriage. I won't go into the specifics as to why, but suffice it to say, he was a lying, cheating jerk. Early on during the marriage, I tended to not be all that assertive until I finally had my fill and grew a backbone. He hated that. He did not like hearing the word no from me or in doing things my own way. So fast forward to a month after we were officially divorced, he was in his new place and I was in my house, formerly the house we shared with our sons. But he still had a ton of his stuff there. Stuff I didn't want even though I paid for a lot of it. But stuff I knew he really wanted. He finally reached out and demanded, not asked, demanded I send him his stuff. Just toss it all in boxes and send it over to him. His exact words. Mind you, he was only about 10 miles away from me at that point and could have easily come over to do it himself. He didn't want to do that because he'd have to see me, something he was actively trying not to do. Cue the malicious compliance. Now, a lot of what he had were collectibles, no details, but some of it was fairly expensive and fragile. So I did as he asked. Correction, demanded. I tossed it all into numerous boxes. Now, some of the truly expensive items, I did take great care in packing them, only because I knew my sons would probably eventually want them. But for the stuff I knew my ex really wanted and cared a lot about, nah, I just tossed it all in a box without a care in the world. Now, I did inspect everything, and while I just dumped them in boxes, nothing was damaged by me. I also took pictures of it to prove it. So once I closed them all up, I told him to either get his butt over to pick it up or get someone to do it for him. He got someone to do it. Now, I was not at the house when this person picked everything up, but my sons and sister were. They did not know how everything was packed. They only showed him the boxes. They told me that the person who picked up the boxes quite literally just tossed them in the back of his pickup without a care in the world, and then sped away. Later that night, I got a call from my ex, who started calling me a bee for destroying all his stuff. I told him that everything was fine before I closed the boxes up, and I had proof of it. I then said that maybe next time be a bit nicer to me when making requests, and reminded him he demanded that I toss it all in boxes, but he didn't tell me to be gentle in doing so. I hung up on him and proceeded to enjoy my celebratory glass of wine that evening, hoping that he was enjoying the shattered remains. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called CreativeSun6739. It says, "Did you put your feet up while sipping that wine? I know you did. I would have too." OP responded to this one and said, "Maybe." Another commenter down below called Shadow Foxy said, "If he had bothered to go over and get his own stuff, this would not have happened. Nor did he even tell this person what was in the boxes and to be gentle. Laugh out loud." You know, OP's ex is the cheating dick, so I'd say whatever he has coming to him is what he has coming to him. And OP covered their own butt. Everything was intact when they put it in the box, so it's completely not their fault. It doesn't matter how it got there or how it got broken, OP is absolved of any liability. This story comes to us from Perfect Scene 9541. Message from God. Was on call rotation, beeper went off, go into work. This was in the day when the beeper just went off. You had to know who to call. No LED screen with a number, just audio. But I digress. Working at a hospital, and once or twice a week, the beeper goes off. Call, 3rd floor radiology. Already, I know the issue. The night x-ray transcriptionist has removed the paper so he can work on his personal Japanese language class. We could never prove it. This is a dot matrix printer with normally triplicate forms, again a long time ago. He can't get the forms back in, calls the operator, who calls the beeper. One night, we're working very late or early, beeper goes off and I'm on site with a coworker. We'd just set up a God account for fun. We did a terminal to terminal message. I know what you're doing. What we didn't know was you can't use the maximum number for priority on a user account. Result, mainframe crashes. For clarity, the message would read, "Message from God, I know what you're doing." We call the hospital, operator can't see where from. Be there in about 30, normal response time. About 30 minutes later, we head up to the 3rd floor. Guy is white as a sheet. Change out paper, no words are exchanged. After that night, never got a call from 3rd floor radiology. Probably means he saw the message on the screen before everything went dark on the computer. We fixed the priority value so we didn't crash the mainframe again. Laugh about it to this day, decades later. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called BunnySlayer64. It says, "Rolling on the floor laughing. This is epic. Even better that the mainframe crashed right after he read it, giving even more impact to the message." Can you imagine this guy sitting at this computer and all of a sudden that pops up on the screen, he gets a chance to read it, and then everything goes black? If he knows nothing about computers, I can only imagine what he'd be thinking at that point. This story comes to us from DoMath3995. Wanna write me up? Sure. I have a patient who deals with occasional mental confusion. He usually has a personal aide, so he's used to getting whatever he wants when he wants it. I pride myself on being able to get along with and even build relationships with the most difficult of the patients, but he has proved difficult to me due to the combination of entitlement and his confusion. He had his son visiting him today and was severely under the impression that his son was taking him home. Any attempt of explanation fell on deaf ears. His son left, but he didn't give up. He insisted I take him to the front door and let him leave, despite there being freezing rain and no one to take him anywhere. Eventually, after 3 times of him telling me to take him to the door and my futile attempts to redirect or reassure, he told me if I wouldn't take him to the door, he would write me up for insubordination. Cue malicious compliance. I figured, why not? At least writing me up would keep him distracted from trying to leave, and it truly seemed like the only way to calm him down. There were at least 5 witnesses to what was happening, so I wasn't worried about facing any discipline. I grabbed the complaint form, a pen, and a clipboard for him. As I did this, the nurse caught on to what I was doing and started just laughing. I brought him the form and even helped him fill it out, spelling my full name for him and showing my name tag as proof that I was giving my real name. Eventually, I have to move to stand behind him because I can't hide my laughter. My director of nursing comes over and the nurse explained the situation. I bring the patient over to her and he hands the form in. I just have the biggest crap-eating grin as everyone is going purple trying to contain their laughter. My director of nursing was a total bro about it and played along with it while also taking him to play bingo, satisfied that I was being appropriately reprimanded. The director of nursing let me keep the complaint form as long as I completely scratched out his information and I framed it next to my Employee of the Month certificate. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Lori2345. It says, I think that's more wholesome compliance, as it didn't hurt him doing that. It sounds like he felt better writing the complaint, and it gave him something to do. It was nice of you to do that. I remember many years ago when one of my grandmothers was in a nursing home and we went to visit. I walked into my grandmother's room and an elderly man walked in right behind me, grabbed my hand, and asked me if we were going home. It was both a sweet and a sad moment at the same time. I think what got me the most about that visit on that day though, was when they told me that to get out the front door, all you had to do was pop in the code of the current year, and most of the people they had there had no idea what year it was. This story comes to us from Secret Koala 1900. Are we there yet? First time poster here, so I'm not sure if it's truly malicious compliance. This was back in 83 or 84. I was about 22, and one of my Christmas presents was defective and had to be sent to the manufacturer for replacement. My dad thought since it was only about a 2-hour trip at most, and a nice day, we'd drive to the factory store and get a new one. So off we went, me, mom, and dad. I knew the route well, as I spent large parts of the last few summers at my buddy's cabin on a lake in northern Illinois, or going to concerts in southern Wisconsin. So off we went with mom holding the map. Yes, a paper map that was near impossible to fold. After 20 minutes, I told dad I knew a better way. Of course, being a dad, he was always right. No son, the map says this is the best way. Frustrated, I waited a few more minutes. But dad, that map's at least 2 years old. It's okay, son, this is the right way. After about another hour of telling dad my way was better, and him ignoring me, I gave up. Then I had a thought. You're treating me like a child, the youngest of 4. I'm going to act like a child. In my best little kid voice, "Are we there yet?" The look of fear and shock on my parents' face was priceless. The rest of the trip, I kept up a steady stream of the little kid car ride questions until we arrived, with dad announcing, "We're here." My response, "I want to go home." This was followed by a backhand to the face that came out of no place, just like when I was little. Not enough to really hurt, of course, basically just a tap. It came as a surprise, just like when I was little. While in the store, I talked dad into letting me drive home. He was shocked when I turned into the nice, semi-new 4-lane road. "Damn, son, when did they build this?" I just laughed and kept driving. Sometimes, father isn't right. Dad gave me a nasty look, and mom laughed in the back seat. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called TesterPT5. It says, "I remember my dad's shortcuts and me yelling, 'No!' a worthy Darth Vader moment, cause normal route would take X amount of time, and with shortcuts, it would be X amount of time times 3. To this day, I still say no to trips with my dad. It just takes too long, and the scenery is just meh. My parents would drive us all over the place when we were younger, visiting friends, going to various places, and we got used to the really long drives in the car. I also got used to the fact that I didn't need to ask how long the trip was going to be, because my dad would let me have it. Mom was always awesome for these long trips though. She'd bring snacks, she'd have drinks, and she'd have us bring like word search books or other activity books that we could do on the way, or even just books to read. She planned ahead very well. I think it's because she just didn't want to listen to us. This story comes to us from Notice Me Senpai U. Don't touch anything electrical if you're not an electrician. Let me preface this by saying I'm not sure how malicious this is, but it sure was funny. Years back, I used to work on the melt deck at a foundry in the area. It was a union job, so everyone had their own roles to do. I was in melting, and one of our jobs was to melt the iron for another department to pour into the molds. Every so often, we would trip a breaker on one of the furnaces and had to call an electrician to come up to the melt deck to fix it. The panels for the furnaces opened up, and the electricians would just flip a switch and it'd be fixed. The problem was, sometimes it would take 20 plus minutes for an electrician to show up and fix it. Waiting a few minutes wasn't much of a big deal, but when it would be over 30 minutes, it would start cutting into our pay, since we got paid based on tonnage melted, and when we couldn't melt iron, no money. Eventually, our assistant to the foreman got sick of it and would open the panel and flip the switch himself so we could keep going. The electricians found out what we were doing and had a meltdown, no pun intended, and told us we weren't allowed to do that and not to touch anything electrical if we weren't an electrician. Some words were had and we agreed, only for the electricians to go right back to taking forever responding to our calls. Everyone on the melt deck decided that anything electrical was out of our pay grade. We then proceeded to call electricians up to the melt deck to plug in and unplug our phone chargers, stating it's electrical and I can't touch it. Of course, we wouldn't tell them that over the radio, just that we need an electrician on the melt deck for an electrical issue. They didn't find it as funny as we did, and eventually we all agreed to stop calling them for our phones and their response time significantly improved. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called JJ1101. It says, I assume these were internal electricians. An external company would say thank you and bill for each visit. OP responded and said, we could quite literally see their hangout area from up on the melt deck, which is why the ATF got frustrated and started flipping the breaker himself. We would call them, and while watching them stand around talking, respond to our call saying that they would be on their way, just to go back to talking for a while and finishing their coffees. I think the whole, if you're gonna waste my time, I'm gonna waste your time thing works perfectly in this situation. I understand the reasoning behind the electricians needing to be the ones that flip that switch, because anything else in that box, if it were touched, could cause major problems or even injury. This story comes to us from Perfect Speller at the Double. Setup: my near boomer dad came to stay for a couple of weeks. In the first few days, he wanted some stuff printed off. Local map, opening times of attractions. I printed his stuff. I printed his stuff single-sided. With the aging and cantankerous printer, double-sided is an effort and wastes almost as much paper as it saves. Trigger: he never misses an opportunity to be bombastic and pompous. I get a lengthy lecture on wasting the world's resources, squandering my money, being disrespectful to the family values of frugality and care for the environment that he had so lovingly imprinted on me during a long childhood. In future, he told me, be sure to always print double-sided. Malicious compliance time. He ordered some stuff online during his stay, and a couple of things need to be returned. Would I print the return label and packing slips? Sure thing, anything for him. I printed them double-sided. So one sheet of paper had the label that goes on the outside of the package and the return authorization slip that goes on the inside. Fallout: what the H am I supposed to do with this? He asked. Dunno, I said. Maybe cherish it as an example of our family values in saving the world by always printing double-sided. After sufficient time teasing him had passed, I showed him the printer has a copy function, but continued to lament the waste in using it to reprint one side. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Bug Zappers. It says, I would have told him he could save even more by using a phone for maps and event schedules. No paper needed at all. Yeah, I don't know about this one, because if I said this to my dad, who is in his mid-70s, he might pull out 2 cans on a string and ask me where the map is. Did you know that every KCC video is also produced in podcast form? You can search for Karma Comment Chameleon on every major podcasting platform. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.